Good morning, everyone. Our study is entitled Economic Liberalization Among Southeast Asian Nations, a comparative analysis of market freedom in Singapore, Vietnam, and the Philippines. Okay, thank you. Much like the other geopolitical regions in the world, the economic landscape of Southeast Asia is characterized by striking diversity, with countries adopting a comprehensive range of developmental stages, economic systems, and governance models, all of which reflect the varying degrees of state control and market liberalization that Southeast Asian nations observe. Influenced by historical legacies, political ideologies, and socio-economic objectives, it is inevitable to find diversity evident from one country to another. The evolutionary experiences of Singapore, Vietnam, and the Philippines highlight how distinct approaches to market liberalization can lead to diverse economic and social outcomes. For instance, Singapore is renowned as a model of economic success, given that it has developed highly efficient and competitive market economy reinforced by strong state intervention in strategic sectors. This approach, which involves a tactical blend of market principles and state control, has allowed the city-state to achieve rapid industrialization, high levels of foreign direct investment, and sustained economic growth. In contrast, Vietnam's economic model only began transitioning from a centrally planned economy to what is now termed as a socialist-oriented market economy in the late 20th century, marked by the Doi Moi reforms, which were introduced in the late 1980s that caused a shift towards market liberalization, allowed for a greater private sector participation, and opened the country to foreign investment. However, as mentioned earlier by our first presenters, the Vietnamese government maintains a considerable control over key industries, which has impacted the pace of liberalization to be merely gradual. Meanwhile, the Philippines presents a different trajectory, distinguished by a mixed economy that, although similar to Vietnam's combination of market liberalization aspects with substantial state intervention, its efforts toward market freedom have been largely influenced by a complex interplay of political factors, revealing a rather patchy effectivity that has produced uneven results, which you will be able to see later. Considering all this study aims to compare the economic and social outcomes of market liberalization in Singapore, Vietnam, and the Philippines in the 20th century. A central component of this analysis, of course, is the examination of historical trajectories of liberalization in each country, highlighting the key policy decisions and external factors, to identify the challenges and opportunities as the countries transitioned, and analyze the 21st century economic and social outcomes of the varying approaches to market liberalization, and lastly, to offer policy recommendations. The central questions informing this study are twofold. First, we have the extent to which market liberalization has affected the GDP growth, FDI inflow, income inequality, and social welfare in Singapore, Vietnam, and the Philippines. And second, what lessons can be derived from a comparison of different approaches to market liberalization adopted by these three countries. This study, for its methodology, this study uses both quantitative and qualitative analysis from reliable secondary sources such as the World Bank, IMF, WHO, UNDP, academic articles, and government reports. Now, for the findings, let's start with the GDP growth comparison in Vietnam, which is the color green, and Singapore, which is represented in orange, and the Philippines in blue, for the years 2001 up to 2023. As you can see, Singapore has maintained a consistent, although moderate, GDP growth rate owing to its status as a mature and high-income economy. The data presented in Table 10 reveals that Singapore's GDP growth averaged at 4.7 during the period of 2000 to 2023, with minor variations resulting from global economic cycles, especially in the global financial crisis in 2008, which you could see there was a dip in the data in 2008, and of course in the COVID-19 pandemic. This is actually a trend that can be observed from this data across the three countries. As they all saw a dip in this time, Singapore was able to ensure that the adverse impact was relatively short-lived. Meanwhile, Vietnam has recorded one of the highest industrial growth rates in Southeast Asia. They had a 6.3% on average yearly. And in the Philippines, it has varied and on average ranges at 4.9. Now, in terms of FDI, relatively the same findings can be observed. Singapore has always placed within the top 5 choices for a preferred destination in Southeast Asia in terms of FDI, thanks to its strategic location. And FDI inflows as a percentage of GDP in Singapore averaged at a high of 20.72% for the years 2001 to 2023. And this was contrasted, of course, by the 4.8 and 1.7% averages of Vietnam and the Philippines during the same time, respectively. For the third economic indicator, the income inequality, as represented by the Gini index, Gini coefficient index, it is clear that the Singapore's figure began at around 45 in the year 2001 and had rather minor fluctuations during the period till the year 2020, which was nearly 40. And Vietnam has a different pattern, demonstrating that the Gini index is lower, depicting less income disparity throughout the period. The Philippines presents a more complex picture in which their Gini index valued at 47 in 2001, which dropped over time. And while this growth means progress in reducing income inequality, the country is still confronted with major challenges, where a modern urban sector coexists with a large impoverished agricultural, rural sector. Now let's move on to the social indicators, starting with the unemployment rate. The gist of this basically is that Singapore has peaked at 5.9% in 2003 as an aftermath of a global economic downturn. And in 2019, the unemployment rate in Singapore had fallen to 3.1% only, among the lowest in the region. In Vietnam, has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the world, reflecting its dramatic economic transformation. There was a peak of 2.7 in 2001 and gradually fell, reaching to 0.99% in 2011. In the Philippines, the highest level of unemployment rate stood at 3.8%, recorded in year 2009 during the global financial crisis as well, which greatly battered the country's economy at the time. And however, in 2023, there was a growth in the services sector, particularly in BPOs. Next, let's move on to the literacy rate. Now, Singapore has always seen high literacy rates, improving even in the further last 20 years, which stood at 95.86% in 2010 and all the way to 97.65% in 2021, which is a testament to the fact that the government has sustained investment in education. Riding on this trend also, Vietnam has seen an improvement which went to up to 97.65% in 2023. And the same as this can be said for the Philippines, because it went from 92.59 in 2003 to the highest of 98.47 in 2020 to 2021. To support this data, here is the government expenditure on education for the three countries. As you can see, it is a continuous rising level. Towards the end, they had already established these infrastructures which made them invest less and maximize what has already been established. Moving on, the infant mortality rate. This refers to the number of deaths per 1,000 live births and are considered one of the leading indicators of the quality of healthcare available in the country. As you can see, there is a vast difference between the data from Vietnam and the Philippines compared to that in Singapore. It was highest at 2.8 in 2001 and reached an all-time low of 1.8 in 2022. Seemingly high, Vietnam is one of those countries that have shown progress as well, and the same is in the Philippines, although showing the highest case among 3 countries, had 27.7 in 2001 and gradually falling to 21.8 in 2022. Now, to support the infant mortality rates, this is the data for the domestic general government health expenditure for the 3 countries. Moving on, this is the last indicator, the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, or Human Development Index. This is more of a comprehensive indicator comprising factors assessing the social and economic development of countries. Singapore has always been ranked among the highest, with peaking at 0.9 in 2022, and Vietnam also has been immensely successful in improving its HDI with 0.7% credited to its efforts toward poverty reduction and expanded opportunities. And the same can be said to the Philippines, although it has increased steadily, it is somewhat in a slower pace than the former 2. With its highest at also the same with Vietnam, 0.7% in 2019. Moving on, here is the summary for each country. The Singapore has high GDP growth, strong FDI inflows, low income inequality, which reflects the institutional and development economics emphasis on human capital and effective institutions for inclusive development. For Vietnam, there is rapid transformation due to Doi Moi reforms, balancing market liberalization with state-led development, which highlights the importance of strategic state intervention as emphasized by development and institutional economics, and the Philippines having a moderate economic growth and erratic FDI inflows, largely credited to the 60-40 ownership policy in the Philippines, which reflects mainly the influence of political and economic structures on uneven outcomes, pointing to the need for targeted state interventions as supported by development economics. Can I still have 1 minute? Thank you. So for the comparative summary, Singapore achieved a balance by combining neoliberal policies with strong institutions, leading to both economic success and social well-being. Vietnam's rapid progress reflects the benefits of a mixed approach with market liberalization paired with state intervention, although issues of equity and institutional strengths remain pressing concerns. In contrast, the Philippines' experience underscores the challenges that arise when markets are liberalized without strong institutions or effective governance, resulting in uneven economic outcomes and persistent social issues. These cases collectively emphasize that development requires a nuanced, context-specific approach. Thank you.
Thank you for the presenter. Before the first panelist listen, I will just a little bit of comment. That's very interesting. As you will see that the panelists are from the Philippines and Vietnam, and the case study included these 2 countries. I think you can have some kind of conversation discussing about the topic in private after the panel. You will learn very much from the local opinions. Okay, yeah, please. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Good morning, everyone. So I give a briefing